The city of Tallahassee in Florida was a quiet rural suburb, but when a university professor was left bleeding to death in his driveway, everything changed. The residents raised the alarm. The man's name is Daniel Eric Markell. He had 2 young sons and everything he needed in life. The police have no evidence, no suspects, no DNA traces, and only one witness who gave vague information about the case. This case will be neither quick nor easy to solve. The police will have to use all their experience and patience to get to the bottom of it. Daniel Eric Markell, born in 1972 in the Canadian city of Toronto, was a successful and very intelligent man. He studied at various universities, including the University of Jerusalem, Cambridge, and finally Harvard, where he graduated in law in 2001. In the following years, Daniel worked at a law firm, but in 2005, an opportunity arose that he couldn't pass up. The University of Florida was looking for someone with exactly his qualifications to teach at their law faculty, and he seized the chance. Daniel met the university's requirements perfectly. First, he enjoyed teaching, and second, he loved criminal law. While teaching various legal subjects at the university, he also found time to write many works on criminal law. Another welcome addition to Daniel's life was his new partner, Wendy Adelson, whom he met on a dating site for Jewish singles. Daniel was 33 years old at the time, and Wendy was 26, and they matched perfectly. Wendy also had a passion for criminal law and had studied it. Later, she taught at Florida State University, just like Daniel. Their relationship began so quickly that they couldn't wait to get married. In a short time, they got to know each other intensively, got engaged, and finally married on February 26, 2006. Daniel and Wendy lived their perfect life. They both had their dream jobs, a good income, and in 2009, they had their first son, followed by their second son in 2010. Life seemed perfect for them, and it continued that way until 2012 when their relationship failed and the couple separated. Before the divorce, the spouses kept all the details a secret, so no one can say with certainty why their marriage fell apart so dramatically. In 2013, they were divorced, and the image they presented to the public in no way reflected the life in their home and family. One day, Daniel was on a business trip, and when he returned and entered the house, he was shocked to find that the house was almost completely emptied. Wendy had left Daniel a few things, including a mattress. Wendy didn't take long to empty the house. She needed only a day and a night while Daniel was away. Although it was generally known that moving out of a house could be stressful and required careful planning, Wendy had obviously been thinking about it for some time. How far she went to ransack the house was proof of how much their marriage had fallen apart. Besides, she left one more thing for Daniel. On top of the mattress was a stack of divorce papers. A divorce was not that simple, and unfortunately Wendy had a lot of reasons to be angry, and apparently did her best to cause Daniel as much pain as possible. Throughout the entire process, Wendy changed the children's surnames to her own, and even changed the first name of one of the sons, which had been given in memory of one of Daniel's deceased relatives. Wendy took the separation hard and did her best to erase all traces of Daniel's presence in her life and the lives of their children. It was one thing when a man and a woman realized they no longer wanted to be together, but in the case of the children, they would probably still have to communicate. Trying to take the children away from their father or any other parent seems vengeful and heartless. Let's move a little further into 2014. Daniel and Wendy lived their own lives. Wendy had started writing a book about human trafficking, but it turned out she didn't have the same approach as Daniel, and it was a complete failure. The book was described as criminally poor, so people didn't need to rush to their local bookstores to buy such a masterpiece. On July 18, 2014, Daniel set off to Wendy's house to pick up the children and take them to preschool. This was quite typical of his daily routine. He also went to the gym and visited a few stores. All in all, nothing special. But that was about to change soon. At 11 a.m., Daniel had finished his errands and returned home. When he stopped in front of his house, he noticed that someone was already waiting for him. It was not disclosed who Daniel was talking to on the phone at that moment, but the man told the police about the conversation and what he could hear and understand. He said that the man waiting for Daniel was lying in wait to attack him. There was no conversation between the two, just a loud bang before Daniel could even open his car door. The bullet flew through the driver's side window and hit him in the face with such speed that his head hit the headrest. A neighbor happened to hear the shot and saw the bloody scene with his own eyes. Daniel was still sitting upright in the driver's seat, shattered glass everywhere, and the interior of the car and the windshield were soaked in blood. The neighbor immediately called 911. He later said that he saw a car pull into the driveway, heard a shot, and saw Daniel severely injured in the front seat of the car. Daniel was still alive but couldn't call for help. The neighbor added that he didn't know if the man had tried to take his own life or if someone had shot him, but he definitely needed help. When the ambulance was called, the police tried to gather all possible information from the neighbor, but the only thing he saw was a silver Toyota Prius leaving the area immediately after the shot. The police had to take the case seriously, but it was also possible that it wasn't anything suspicious. It could have been someone just passing by. After 19 minutes, the ambulance arrived, and Daniel was taken to the nearest hospital. The person who had spoken with the neighbor hadn't informed the driver how serious the injured man's condition was, so it took 19 long minutes for the paramedics to arrive. Daniel had been shot in the face, and in such situations, every minute counts. We will never know if the late arrival of the ambulance contributed to it, but Daniel didn't survive his injuries. He died 14 hours later in intensive care. The police were now faced with a difficult task. A man who seemed to have no enemies, who was loved by everyone, had been cold-bloodedly shot in his driveway, and all they had to go on was a silver Toyota Prius that might or might not have been involved. Shortly thereafter, a memorial service was held for Daniel. Many people were present that day, including friends, family members, and students who wanted to express their love, honor, and respect for the professor. Since the police had no evidence or suspects, they had to decide where to start. The first suspect was Wendy Adelson, Daniel's ex-wife. She was brought to the police on the same day the man was shot. Wendy wasn't arrested, but the police had to start somewhere. When the woman entered the interrogation room, she listened to a voicemail left by a friend who worked as a real estate agent. The voicemail said, "Hello, Wendy. I feel a bit silly doing this. I'm not trying to dramatize the situation, but there was a shooting near your former home today. I hope you're okay." The message went on to say that the friend was sorry Wendy had to find out this way, but there had been a shooting outside her former home, and her ex-husband was very seriously injured and probably wouldn't survive. Wendy was very shocked and immediately broke into tears. She said she had been in contact with Daniel via email that morning and everything seemed fine. Then she asked the investigators what had happened to her ex-husband, and the police officer told her he couldn't provide any information until he established her whereabouts at the time of the shooting to rule her out as a suspect. Wendy seemed very empathetic, but at the same time almost inconsolable with grief. The woman told the police officer that she had left her house around noon to run some errands and had even tried to drive through her old street but noticed it was blocked off. When the police officers asked her if she knew anyone who might have a reason to harm Daniel, she just continued to cry uncontrollably. Finally, she responded that he sometimes treated people badly, but she didn't believe there was anyone who would be so cruel to him. When the investigator asked if Daniel owed anyone money, she tearfully replied that her ex-husband owed her money for child support. Wendy appeared genuinely shocked. She was beside herself with grief, and the officer conducting the interview treated her very gently and with compassion. The problem for the police was that they still had nothing concrete to go on. They believed it couldn't be a robbery since the man hadn't tried to break into Daniel's house, get into his car, or search his pockets to steal his wallet, house keys, or credit cards. At this point, there was only one motive for them: revenge. But for what could he have been avenging? Was Wendy really right? Had Daniel really hurt someone or done something wrong? Simply being annoying was one thing, but provoking someone to draw a gun and cold-bloodedly shoot a person in broad daylight was another. To find a lead, the police decided to turn to the public. They made it clear that this was a premeditated murder. A reward was immediately offered for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the perpetrator, starting at $10,000, but increasing until it reached $25,000. An anonymous donor also offered an additional $100,000 on top of the police reward. The investigators soon expanded the pool of potential suspects, interviewing students, friends, and family members. But despite their efforts, it all led to nothing. Everyone around them kept saying the same thing. Daniel was a really good guy, a good teacher, a good father. It turned out that no one had the slightest idea why someone would want to kill him. In every murder investigation, the first 24 hours are crucial for gathering evidence. However, 12 months passed, and they still had nothing new. On the anniversary of the murder, another press conference was held. At this time, the police, for some inexplicable reason, released images of a silver Toyota Prius for the first time. The police never explained why they waited a whole year before releasing this information. After all, the car could have been burned or scrapped within 12 months. Another appeal to the public went unanswered, and the case remained open for another 12 months without any developments. Whoever committed the murder had now had more than enough time to dispose of all the evidence, and the police's chances of solving the case were slim to none. The case continued in this manner until May 26, 2016. Almost 2 years had passed since Daniel was murdered. A judge in Leon County had issued an arrest warrant for 34-year-old Sigfredo Garcia, who was charged with first-degree murder, specifically the murder of Daniel Markel. The Tallahassee police refused to release details at the time of the arrest, presumably to avoid jeopardizing the case. But a few days later, a judge in Leon County ordered the release of information. It turned out that investigators believed Garcia was an accomplice of Luis Rivera, a 33-year-old man, and that the two had left Miami in a rented silver Toyota Prius between July 16th and 17. The police had gathered various information about the two, including cell phone data, electronic toll records, and surveillance footage from various buildings and buses in the area. The footage was believed to show the duo following Daniel Markel on his daily route from the daycare to the gym, to shopping and back home on July 18th. But why were these two men suddenly suspects? And why did they decide to kill a man they seemingly had never met before? The police suspected it was a contract killing. Both men had been paid to kill Daniel Markel, and mysteriously, this information came from an informant who has remained anonymous ever since. This leaves a very important question unanswered. If this was a contract killing, who had hired the two? This was about to come to light. Whatever Garcia and Rivera were paid for their services, it wasn't enough to take the blame, and when they realized the game was up, they quickly began to spill everything. When questioned by the police, they told the investigators that they had been hired by none other than Charlie and Donna Adelson. Charlie was the brother of Daniel's ex-wife, Wendy, and Donna was their mother. Both were seemingly honorable people who jointly ran the pathology clinic of the Adelson Institute. Charlie was a dentist, and Donna was in charge of patient care. You might not believe it, but all this information alone wasn't enough to bring Charlie and Donna to court. As far as the police knew, the suspects could have named anyone to save their own skins. And what connection could there be between a respectable family man running a dental clinic and two contract killers from Miami? Surprisingly, it didn't take long to figure that out. It turned out that the missing link was a woman named Catherine Magbanua. She was not only involved with Charlie Adelson, but also had a previous relationship with Sigfredo Garcia, with whom she had 2 children. Phone records showed that Catherine received a call from Luis Rivera almost immediately after the murder of Daniel Markel, presumably to inform her that the job was done. Catherine was the sole intermediary between Rivera, Garcia, and the Adelsons. They claimed they had never met before. Catherine received $100,000 to organize everything. Looking at her bank account, it was clear that Catherine had made deposits totaling tens of thousands of dollars over a 12-month period. This began a few months before Daniel Markel's murder and continued for months afterward. Wasn't that a bit too stupid? The payments were almost always released in the form of checks. That wasn't a smart move by the Adelson family. Checks are very easy to trace for a simple reason. They have to be signed by someone. Each deposited check was signed by Donna Adelson. Hatred is too strong a word, but in this case, it might be appropriate. Donna Adelson hated her former son-in-law, especially in the months leading up to the murder. She sent Wendy email after email cursing and insulting him. In one of the emails, she said Wendy had suffered enough because of him when they were married. His narcissism had ruined their marriage. She suggested hitting him where it hurt the most. The entire Adelson family lived in Miami, but Wendy didn't. She had settled near Daniel in Tallahassee, but desperately wanted to move to Miami to be closer to her family. Since Daniel hadn't done anything violent like stalking his ex-wife or similar behavior, he went to court and obtained an order preventing Wendy from moving away with the children. This was because they had agreed on a 50-50 custody arrangement during the divorce. However, there was another reason why his mother-in-law despised him so much. Shortly before his murder, Daniel had gone to court and filed a petition that would have prevented Donna Adelson from spending time alone with his children without Daniel's supervision. Of course, this in no way justified Donna's actions, as we know the murder was planned long before the petition was filed in court. So far, everything seems pretty straightforward and clear, right? The mother-in-law was very angry. The daughter's ex-husband had gone too far. But you shouldn't believe it. Luis Rivera almost let this case slip through the cracks. Rivera, who was serving a prison sentence without bail, asked for permission to speak with the investigators. He said he had information that could be exchanged for a deal. The investigators readily agreed and agreed to question him again. Luis described his version of events to the investigators. He claimed he didn't know someone might be killed until he was already in the car with Garcia. He had been told it was a simple robbery. When he learned about the murder of Markel, he said he didn't like it at all and had only offered to rob the woman who would pay for the job. He and Garcia were supposed to be paid $35,000 each. Nevertheless, Rivera said he didn't want to kill a man who had 2 children, whom he had never met and had nothing against. Rivera claimed he had never heard the man's name before and didn't know what he looked like until he was shown a picture. He claimed he had never heard of the Adelsons until that point, but referred to a woman named Kathy, short for Catherine. Rivera said she was the main person responsible for the whole thing and mentioned that a woman wanted her children back. She wanted full custody of them. Up to that point, the Adelsons had denied any involvement in the murder. Although the police had checks signed by Donna Adelson, it didn't prove she actually wanted to kill Daniel. These checks could have been issued for various reasons. Then the FBI stepped in. They developed a special operation to catch this family. Charlie Adelson received strange calls. These calls were made by a man who called himself Sandy. Sandy asked why Rivera wasn't being taken care of inside the prison and why his family wasn't being taken care of outside. Charlie was visibly scared by the calls, but managed to keep his composure long enough not to give himself away. Sandy was, of course, an undercover investigator, and FBI agents had hacked into Charlie's mobile phone to learn something they could use against him. But this attempt failed for the time being. In July 2016, a court in Leon County charged Rivera with first-degree murder. Catherine was also arrested shortly thereafter. Rivera, who was already in prison for other crimes, managed to have his charge reduced to second-degree murder, presumably through cooperation and a guilty plea. He was sentenced to 12 years for other crimes and was to receive another 19 years for aiding in the murder of Daniel Markel. The trials for Catherine and Sigfredo were consolidated. This happened on October 19, 2016. Since the 2 defendants faced the same charge, the defense argued that Charlie Adelson was the mastermind behind the whole dirty affair. He had allegedly promised $100,000 for the murder, which was to be divided among the 3 so his sister could get full custody of her children without Daniel's interference. During the trial, the prosecutor called an interesting witness, a man named Jeffrey Lacoste, who happened to be Wendy Adelson's ex-boyfriend. He confirmed that he had heard from Wendy that her brother Charlie had discussed the possibility of hiring a hitman to kill Daniel several times. Jeffrey revealed that Wendy had asked him on July 13th if she could tell him something in confidence. She eventually revealed that Charlie had explored all possible solutions to her problem and had talked about finding a hitman to kill Professor Markel. She told Jeffrey that it would cost about $50,000. During the trial, Sigfredo Garcia argued that the fatal shot was fired by his accomplice, Luis Rivera. The problem was that Rivera always claimed the opposite was true. But that was hardly enough to acquit Garcia of first-degree murder. He was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, plus another 30 years for conspiracy. The man made it clear he would appeal the verdict. Catherine, or Kathy, as she was sometimes called, denied any involvement in the murder. In the same trial as Garcia, her charge was reduced to second-degree murder. The jurors couldn't reach a decision, and the judge declared a mistrial, meaning Catherine would have to stand trial again. Catherine's retrial began on May 16, 2022, and lasted 11 days. This time, the jurors were more convinced of their decision. On May 27, 2022, she was found guilty of premeditated murder and conspiracy to commit murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus another 30 years for conspiracy and another 30 years for incitement. Since it was believed that the three main perpetrators were behind bars, this case should be closed, but not quite. Just when everything seemed to be resolved, a new arrest was made. On April 21, 2022, the police arrived at the address of Charlie Adelson. The man was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and incitement to commit murder. As a result of this discovery, the police obtained audio recordings of a conversation between Catherine and Charlie in which both spoke about the conspiracy to commit a crime. Charlie is set to stand trial later this year, and as this case draws to a close, one can't help but feel that there are still many unanswered questions. Indeed, the case is not yet closed, and the big question is, how much did Wendy really know? Judging by the witnesses' testimonies, it was clear why Daniel Eric Markel had to be killed to secure Wendy full custody of her children. It's not hard to speculate that Wendy was much more involved in this case than she has admitted. However, it's important to emphasize that there is no evidence to support this, and Wendy has not been charged with any crime. Donna Adelson is the same woman who signed all those different checks for thousands of dollars. It has been irrefutably proven that she despised her former son-in-law and wanted to make his life as difficult as possible. It's unknown to what extent she was involved, whether she merely signed the checks or was involved in the planning. Just like her daughter, there is no conclusive evidence against her, and no charges have been filed. Charlie Adelson is the only family member who will appear in court, at least for now. Perhaps if Charlie faces a life sentence, he might reveal a few more details. As the case progressed, more and more people became entangled in this criminal web. Despite his mother-in-law's accusations, Daniel Markel did not deserve to die. All his friends and colleagues praised the extensive legacy he left behind and the extensive works he wrote on various areas of law. Above all, his two sons, whom he loved dearly, lost their father. Daniel lived for his children, which explains why he often went to court. He had to ensure they were never taken away from him. Undoubtedly, he would have had much more to offer this world if he had been given the chance. Unfortunately, his life was cut short at the age of only 41 by two men he had never met, and by a woman, Catherine, whom he had also never seen. But you already know who is really behind all this. It's worth noting that this case and the verdicts have shocked the public. Many believe that the two main people responsible for all of this, who clearly wanted and planned everything, are wrongfully free. Thank you for watching. I recommend you check out the other cases as well. Click here and don't forget to activate your notification bell so you don't miss any new videos. See you soon and take care.